Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. No? Yes? No? Seems to be mixed opinions there. We're good. Right. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's had an enjoyable and productive day so far. My name is Nick Kirby. I'm the Shopper E-commerce and Analytics Director for a consultancy called Bridgethorn. In terms of my presentation today, I'm basically going to cover just simple two topics. One is about thinking shopper, and one is about planning shopper. And all the way through that, I'll be hoping to prompt some thoughts about getting you to think differently about the shopper and consumer and the importance of those factors. Very quickly, I'm just a brief overview on what we do, the short pitch. I'm not going to bore you on this one, hopefully. But ultimately, for those that haven't heard of Bridgethorn, we are an operational consultancy specializing in category sales, customer management, and shopper marketing. We deliver our services across the world. At the last count, we've delivered our services in over 40 countries, everywhere between America and Australia. And we deliver solutions in a number of different ways, partly through consultancy, but also through helping our clients, both retailer and manufacturer clients, deliver best practice training, research, and also keeping us very relevant and very fresh and up to speed with what most manufacturers and retailers face. We are putting our team into our clients on an ongoing basis to fulfill roles for them as part of that team. On a personal level, as I say, my name is Nick Kirby. I've been working in the consumer goods industry for more than 20 years. I won't say any more than that. But hopefully I have empathy with a number of people in the audience today because I've actually been both manufacturer and retailer side as an employee of those types of organisation, having done a number of different roles from buying, brand marketing to sales. So I've got, again, empathy and also understanding of what it's like at the hard end of doing these roles, not just from a lifetime's experience of consultancy. Bridgethorn is part of a much larger group called the Suter Group, who offer an integrated suite of services, anything from that strategic development through to in-store direction. That is all I will say on that before I go on to what most of you want to hear is the topic today. So I'm going to start by talking about thinking shopper. So, are they the same or are they different? Well, the answer is it depends. What I would say is, though, as for most clients that I deal with, they talk a lot about the consumer in their business. And the reality is they are not always the same individual. Actually, one of the most important people you will engage with is the shopper. And ultimately, they have different needs, they have different behaviors, they have different expectations of the products and the solutions that you're providing to them. And actually, unless you're differentiating the two apart, ultimately you're potentially talking to them in the wrong language, the wrong message, and the wrong place, actually at the wrong time. Now, importantly, what does that mean? Well, the key thing is it's impacting their choices, depending on whether you're talking to one audience or the other. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're a shopper, actually, let me start. If you're a consumer, you're thinking about the new Buzz Superfruit. What's important to you? It's about the health characteristics. Actually, it's the fact that I can talk about it to my friends because clearly I'm well advanced in food trends. Well, that's fine. And that might absolutely serve its purpose and might serve its need. And clearly, it's important to get some of those key messages across to the consumer. However, it's not going to help them pick it up off shelf. If I'm a shopper, I'm walking around a store, even when I'm planning my shop, I'm thinking about managing a household budget. I'm thinking about convenience. I'm thinking about ease. I'm thinking about, actually, how am I going to find that product in shelf? I need you as a supplier or as a retailer to help me through that path to purchase, to turn me from that end consumer, which is all about the functional and the emotional benefits, through to the shopper aspect, which, again, is actually much more tactical in its execution. It's helping engage me. It's helping me think about how are you going to make, how's your product going to make its way onto my shopping list? So with that in mind, the one thing we say to our clients when we're talking about shopper is this simple fact, is that they remember, regardless of whether the consumer actually, they actually do consume your product, the shopper is responsible for 100% of your revenue, whether or not you're a manufacturer or a retailer. There's no such thing as a consumer in those arenas. Why? Because it's those persons that hand in their money over at the till, over at the counters, their hard-earned money, that actually make that final decision. Now, to give you an example from my background, I spent quite a lot of time working in the drinks industry. And I remember sitting in a research group and someone talking about Stella Artois, the beer brand. Is everyone familiar with that brand? And we were researching shoppers. And actually in this instance, and sorry, it's a bit stereotypical, but it's going back a few years, and this is generally what used to happen, is that the female of the household actually bought everything from the grocery store. She said in that research group, my husband's beer brand, his favourite beer brand, is Stella. He loves it when I buy it for him. And then she proceeded, quite deadpan, to say, yeah, but I never do. And I never do because, firstly, it's too strong, so I know he's going to have one can and fall asleep on the sofa. And secondly, quite frankly, I'm not going to spend the household budget on an expensive lager when I know he actually won't tell the difference between that and the own label brand from the retailer. Now, whether or not that was the case, whether or not that was true that you can tell the difference is almost irrelevant. What that brand at the time wasn't doing was talking to the shopper. They were talking to the consumer, they were building awareness about the brand, and they were building the brand image, but that brand image wasn't resonating with the shopper. That brand was not being picked up off shelf, and as a result, they have changed their approach as a result of that to talk to both of those parties. So what does that mean then in terms of taking some of that thinking and then applying it to your business? And I won't pretend this is easy. It's not. But the key thing is, the first key point to recognize is the fact that the shopper journey is just much more complex than it ever used to be. When I first started working in this industry, the reality is you talked about supermarket shoppers or convenience store shoppers occasionally, but in the main supermarket shoppers, because that's the only place people went to buy their groceries. And as a result, actually, it was much more about talking about consumer then, because that's all you really needed to do. There was more of a connection between those two parties. But what we found clearly over the last 10 years or so, those shopper journeys are not as linear as they ever used to be. It wasn't about engaging with the shopper. They go to one store, take it home, and that cycle gets repeated. Ultimately, people are choosing to shop in different places at different times, 24 hours of the day, whenever is convenient to them. That purchase journey is fragmented because they're being interrupted by different forms of media at every single point. So choosing that right media at the right time on that path is absolutely critical to get your message across. Whether you're starting to talk about building awareness about your brand and the benefits of it, all the way through to following that into store to say, buy me now. As a result of that, we absolutely need to understand how people live their lives. If you're from a manufacturer background, you need to understand what else is going in their shopping basket. You need to understand, actually, not just how to sell more of your category, but how does your products compete with other products in the category? Because ultimately, it's in the retailer's interest to grow the total category, not just the products that are being supplied to them. And unless you understand the shopper and what motivates them at the point of purchase, ultimately, someone else will win that challenge. And how do you do that? Well, I think many of you have probably heard about the 360-degree approach to marketing, which feels like a lovely terminology to use. But actually, it's relatively simple. It's that vicious circle of communication. And it does require a change in model. It requires, ultimately, actually winning at that individual point on the journey, making sure you're standing out in a world of greater influences. And importantly, creating a greater connection between the shopper and consumer, albeit differentiating the messages you're trying to deliver at each point. You can only do that ultimately by integrating the shopper into your business. And to do that, you have to be able to deliver effective plans, which I'll come on to in a moment, but also deliver very targeted calls to action. An example from another category, and again, I'd kind of laud these guys as probably masters in terms of distinguishing between consumer and shopper. The likes of Coca-Cola. Has anyone ever worked for Coca-Cola in their background? Okay. Now, they have a brand called Fanta. Now, in their business model, they have the Coca-Cola company, the brand owner, and they have bottlers and the distributors. And not all the time do those two parties talk, because ultimately they are separate entities. Now, 10 years ago, you had a brand called Fanta, and actually a lot of the targeting, whilst maybe not overt, was really kind of looking at the teen audience. It was all about image, it was all about being cool. Again, if you're in the main, the person that was buying the product for, actually for the end consumer, was mum buying for teenagers. Now, clearly, if you're talking about being a cool brand and resonating with teenagers, again, quite frankly, mums don't care. They've got far too many other things to manage and worry about. So actually, by integrating and changing the way they approach their model, you saw truly integrated campaigns which still kept the brand image up through trying to be cool and resonating with their actually end consumer audience. But they also then supported that by big campaigns that were specifically targeted to mum, which are actually much more about things like real fruit juice in the product. Now for mum, that's pretty important. That's going to make her decision slightly different at the point of purchase. Say, yes, I don't mind giving my kids, my teens that, versus potentially another product. Now, one of the ways to address some of the fundamentals of integrating shopper into your business is actually starting with some of the traditional barriers. How many salespeople have I got in the room? Oh, just one. How many marketers? Only a couple. Well, good. We'll play you guys off against each other. Now, having done both roles, I feel as though I can insult both equally. Sales roles, ultimately you're about actually your customers' needs. Quite frankly, actually, how can I make my next customer meeting a little bit easier and a little bit more pain-free and deliver the next case of product? If you're a marketer, you're thinking about all the nice stuff around consumer needs, building my brand awareness, and maybe the stuff that can't be measured financially. Well, the reality is, those days ultimately are gone, where businesses are trying to deliver a better return on their any investment, whether it be from traditional sales or from traditional marketing. And as a result, everything ultimately has to then feed into the business planning process. And I appreciate this is a much more simplified approach, which is about starting with obviously your corporate strategy, feeding into your individual category strategies based on a specific understanding of those, and then thinking about not just the consumer, not just the customer, but ultimately the shopper, and how they feed into absolutely clearly aligned activation across the three functions. Now, in lots of manufacturers, largest budgets are sales budgets and marketing budgets. And if they are not working in perfect harmony, which we see time and time again, ultimately you're not going to be getting the best return on investment. How do you do that? You put the shopper in the middle of this equation. Actually, you start integrating those. You start breaking down the barriers of working in traditional functional silos. And actually, you build aligned activation plans, which have to stem from not just consumer understanding, but bringing in the new understanding around actually not just who my consumer is, but actually who is the shopper buying for that consumer. Actually, what are their motivations? What makes them tick? What is going to make them pick up my product off shelf? How do I build that into an effective shopper strategy that actually spans everything I do as an organization? And ultimately bringing that to life through effective plans that help me deliver a better return on investment. But clearly, planning is not enough. It has to lead in some sort of integration. Integration not alone, it has to be resolved in planning. And part of that has to stem from how do you approach shopper marketing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to this. Hopefully the presentation will be available online. But clearly, in all the work we've done with our clients, we've identified what we call 5 different levels of shopper marketing, which start from what a lot of people do is ad hoc in-store promotions, mainly driven by a desire to drive short-term peaks in volume, all the way through to building ad hoc, potentially co-branded retailer promotions, what I call kind of the short-term fixes. Well, actually, if you're moving up that level, moving up that spectrum, and building up your advanced level of understanding as shopper and activating it in the right way, you're moving all the way through to the level 5, which is about those fully integrated campaigns that talk to the consumer at the point that's relevant to them, but also talk to the shopper at the point of relevant and bringing it all together. Again, some of the soft drinks guys are incredibly good at this. Coca-Cola, again, brand image. They bring the excitement, they bring a refreshment to life. That's the consumer need. Actually, whilst you might not overtly realize this, The closer you get to a refrigerator in a store, those messages subtly change. You go from refreshment as a consumer, and a typical example would be in petrol forecourts. 400 yards away, you might see a poster about the refreshing Coca-Cola on a nice hot summer's day. 200 yards away, you might get something on your mobile that says, temperature's hot, here's a voucher. When you're at the pumps in the petrol station, you will see something by the fill-in area that says a 2 for X promotion. Then you'll go into the store, actually at the cooler, it'll say, buy me now. It's not subtle, but it works. And it's how you differentiate the message across all of those journeys. The other thing, very quickly, of course, you can't do the shopper part in isolation. You have to be working in conjunction with your retail customers in order to do that. Now, through the work we've done and also through some contacts we've got at a business called the Advantage Group, kind of identified some of those absolute key things that you need to be doing. I'm not going to talk through all these. It's available to you. But clearly, there is a need to build strong retailer investment plans with absolute joint objectives, and that includes the activation you want to put into place. Importantly, making sure you're differentiating your activation. This is that level 5 stuff, making sure you differentiate your activation depending on the retailer strategy. If it's fully integrated and aligned, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It has to be tailored. It's also about driving category initiatives, actually things that grow a retailer's category. Now, having started my working life as a buyer, I quite frankly didn't care where some of my sales were coming from. But you know what? I don't want someone coming to me and saying, actually, we're going to drive great volume, but it's going to be at the expense of competitor B. Doesn't work for me. For me, that's, as a buyer, that's complicated. All that means is I'm shifting money from there to there, but there's no benefit. So if you're coming with unique ideas that drive total category growth, as a buyer, I'm thinking, you know what? That's interesting to me. And of course, making sure you're planning across a multi-channel environment. You're thinking about different store formats, different solutions in a different way. And very quickly, I think one of the penultimate slides. Why are we passionate about this? Because it's well known. There's plenty of studies out there that talk about the fact that a fully integrated shopper approach can deliver 150% more effective spend. I haven't met a client yet that doesn't want to make a better return on their, or measurable return on their investment from both their traditional sales and consumer marketing budgets. So, to conclude from me, a couple of points. Firstly, my urge, if you're either a manufacturer or retailer, know your shopper and know your consumer. Give them an equal weighting in your organization. But importantly, understand how each impacts you differently. And importantly, what you do about that. And you can only do that if those two elements of thinking are absolutely integral to the way you plan and activate against your business needs. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. That was great. Now, does anybody have any questions they'd like to put to Nick? Any at all? You got a question?
Hi, Nick. Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Nick. You obviously gave the Coca-Cola example. Could you give us like a vegetable or fruit example? How you're marketing along that path to actual purchase?
Yeah, I think. Oh, it's very weird hearing your own voice on headphones. Yeah, so one of the things that strikes me is obviously the huge amount of advancement in pre-packaged fruit. Now, if I'm a consumer, for most fruit and vegetables, I'm probably thinking about trying to live reasonably healthy, having a balanced diet. And importantly, the one thing that tends to be forgotten around consumers is it's about taste. I really want to enjoy what I'm eating. Now, if you're a shopper, to some extent, if it's one and the same person, that is a prerequisite, but it's not necessarily considered purchase when you're at the point of purchase. But as a shopper, I might be thinking about convenience. That might well be thinking about the baby new potatoes in butter with herbs. Actually, that are already in a foil tray, that if I know I'm having to do a whole shop for an evening, actually, I think there's quite a lot of work to do, so I'm going to make that as easy as possible. So that's kind of one of the things that stands out for me. And clearly, on that basis, I mean, we've seen lots of advancements in the pre-packaged piece, which kind of fits into that as well. Now, where the shopper and consumer are the same is really interesting. If we take lots of the things like Marks and Spencer's do around pre-packaged food around lunchtime, again, actually, as a consumer, I'm thinking, well, I'm probably being healthy as opposed to choosing the chocolate pot. But I'm thinking as a shopper at that time, at that specific time, and I'm thinking, it's easy, it's convenient, it's got a fork in there. Actually, it's part of a meal deal, so I know I'm not having to spend a little bit more money. So this is where actually, whilst they're one and the same person, the messages absolutely have to change to be very targeted to that specific person, that specific point on the path to purchase. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Nick. Any other questions? Anybody? Don't be shy.
I'm getting off lightly.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Nick. That was wonderful.
Thank you. And what I would say, please do take a look at our website. We have lots of other white papers on our website around shopper and different subjects, free of charge. And you don't even have to enter your details post GDPR. So you're more than welcome to download as you see fit. And I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nick's presentation will be on our website next week, so you'll be able to watch the video or download the PDF. Okay? Thank you.